Chapter 18, Subdivision and Development. In this chapter, we're going to talk about various methods of developing and subdividing land. We're going to identify the impacts of environmental regulations and other laws on sales, health and safety, and building regulations as well. So, to start off, assemblage is when you combine two smaller lots together to make a larger lot. That increase in value is known as plottage value. A subdivider is somebody who buys undeveloped acreage of land and they divide it into smaller lots with all of their engineers and legal staff and whatnot. They try to get all the approvals from the different agencies, state, federal, environmental, and then they sell off those lots now ready to build on to a developer who would then build homes on those lots. Or the subdivider can also be a developer and do the building as well. But that subdivider is a big deal. They could just buy land and try to figure out ways to profitably subdivide it, get all the approvals, and now they could just sell that land ready to build on to a developer at a marked up cost because it's now all ready. It saves them a lot of work and time. So, developing and subdividing land. In New Jersey, when a second lot is sold off of a larger parcel, it is now classified as a subdivision. Now, the state of New Jersey allows municipalities to decide what constitutes a minor subdivision that does not require a public hearing and what constitutes a major subdivision, which would require a public hearing. Minor subdivisions are small ones, usually like one or two lots, but once again, they leave it up to the municipalities to determine that. They do not require new streets or off-site improvements and public hearings for the approvals of all of these changes that could affect the community. Any major subdivision that does have those kinds of additional changes in taxing on the local municipalities' resources would require a public hearing that allows the other people that live in town to chime in and ask questions and maybe say no to certain things, So major subdivision requires public hearings for that, and they have a lot more issues to address and must be give the public the opportunity to question it. Some of the issues of larger subdivisions would be how it would affect the traffic, any additional roads that must be built or traffic lights that need to be put up. You have to address the burden on the local school districts that all those additional children from all of those additional properties that are going to be living in all those additional properties you're building are going to be handled. How is the public works services going to work for snow removal, garbage, recycling, all that stuff? Emergency services, police, fire, waste removal, water and sewage and drainage issues need to be addressed. And environmental impacts, that building this community will have. You're paving over a lot of area. Where's all that water, drainage, and runoff going to go? You may be required to put in maybe a basin on your property somewhere where that could collect that additional runoff. And you guys ever see in a condo complex where there was a big open area of ground and maybe nicely landscaped and stuff, but it looks like if you were to look at it, it looks like a big basin. And it may even have like a sewer pipe there that's above ground, but it's within that basin. That's a way to address the additional runoff for all of that water. It could run off into there and then it kind of like creates a little pond out of it. But then the water runs out of that through the pipe and the pipe with the water runoff into that pipe as the ground and the other rivers and reservoirs and stuff are able to take on any additional water. So it's ways to balance it out for the environment and address the getting approvals of that major subdivision. Okay. So land planning is always before the construction, right? You got to plan out how you're going to do the construction. So it always precedes the construction and subdivision process. Hell, so land planning precedes actual subdividing process, which must comply with the municipality's master plan. A master plan describes, how the community handles all their issues. Everything from schooling and food and hospitalization, public works, policing, emergency response, whether it is with the fires and just natural regular emergencies or if it's like during wartime. Um, every municipality has to have a master plan that basically stipulates how they're going to run their little area, in each municipality. Planning boards and planning commissioners are often consulted. Uh, dedication. What is dedication? Another term to add to your definition list, which we went over in chapter 5 the day I was not here. But what is dedication? It is when you give land to the government for a public use, like streets, schools, and parks. So when a private individual gives land to the government for a public use, like streets, schools, and parks. So, for instance, let's say we're doing a minor subdivision. I'm putting in a cul-de-sac. I own a big enough property I could put a couple of houses on it, but not a huge complex. I'm going to put a cul-de-sac street. I'm going to name that street Kaminsky Drive. That's my last name, right? So I'm going to name it Kaminsky Drive. um, Now I'm going to sell all those houses that I built on my property. So now I subdivided them and I'm deeding them out and I'm selling them all. Once I sell them all, why do I need to remain the owner of the street which was built on my land? That doesn't make much sense to do, right? Plus, I'm going to be putting money out of my pocket, and there's a lot of liability in that now. Now I'm going to deal with snow removal, repaving, and all that stuff whenever it needs. So, in the planning stage of me doing that little minor subdivision to put in that cul-de-sac street, I should put on my plans when I submit them for approval that I'm going to dedicate the streets to the municipality. I get to name it, but I'm dedicating it to the municipality. Okay, that's what one example of dedication. Assurance by bonding that sewer and street costs are going to be paid to initially build them. Compliance with zoning ordinances governing the use and lot size, fire and safety ordinances, building and construction codes, etc. Often a percolation test may be required, especially if you're in an area that's not going to be connecting to city services. So they may put a septic system in the area. So before any septic system can be installed, a percolation test has to occur. It's a test of how well the soil absorbs liquids for drainage and runoff or septic system installation. It determines it's a measurement of how well the soil absorbs liquid, how quickly it absorbs it. You know, anybody got a backyard that when it rains, it seems like the water's there for weeks on end after it rained? Your soil may have a high clay content, so it takes a lot longer for that soil to absorb that water. So it just sits there on top. That would not be good for areas that need that drainage from the runoff to be sucked into the ground, or if you're installing septic systems. It's a very important test then. So, page 340, dedication of land for streets, schools, and parks. It's giving land to the government for a public use, such as streets, schools, and parks. And then down here, a percolation test, often also referred to as a perk test, you'll always get that on exams, is a measurement of how well the soil absorbs liquids for the drainage and runoff. and septic.
I got it.
All right, now we're going to watch a little video from this old house that shows you how a perk test works. So we're going to see this happening in one of these New England states where they always do that this old house episode. So let's take a look.
One of the first things to consider when building a house like this out in the country is a septic plan. What to do with the waste and water that needs to leave that building. Now, it needs to go into a septic system. There's a couple of key components to a septic system. One is a septic tank. Now, this tank will accept waste and water. Now, the solids will stay in the tank and be broken down over time by bacteria. But the water that'll pass through the tank will now go out through a leach field. Now, a leach field is a series of pipes, perforated pipes, that sit below the substrate of the soil, and the water will trickle or drip down through the ground. Now, to determine if you can even have a septic system, it starts with a perk test. Brendan Zabricki's with the town of Essex. You've had your share of perk tests, right?
I sure have.
So what's a perk test?
Well, that stands for percolation test, and it's a field test to simulate how wastewater will travel down through the soil once a septic system is built on top of it.
How fast it'll pass through, sort of like water going down through the coffee grounds in a filter.
That's a good analogy, yes.
Right. Okay. So what have you done to get us to this point?
Well, previous to this, we dug several deep holes, about 10 feet down into the ground.
Okay.
That allowed us to get a look at the various soil layers that you're going to find whenever you dig here in New England.
All right, so this is topsoil. What are you seeing? What am I seeing?
Well, as you just mentioned, this is your topsoil. Then you go through a layer known as subsoil. You then finally get down to a layer that is really the glacial material. In other words, the glacier brought it in.
Yeah.
We have determined that this is the most restrictive or most limiting layer in the soil profile. And the septic system code requires that we actually perform the perk test in that most limiting
So
layer.
you're testing at almost the worst place.
The worst place that you're going to have underneath that system, that's
All right.
correct.
So that looks pretty dense right here, so not
That's
accept
right.
water too well.
That's exactly right. So what we did after that is, knowing what we had in the deep holes, we just had the machine dig down a shelf to the top of that most restrictive layer,
right.
and we're ready to dig a perk hole that's about 12 inches in diameter and about 18 inches deep.
Okay.
Then we're going to fill that hole with water and let the hole sit for a little while to make it saturated. That will be a great simulation of how soil will behave when it's wet underneath a leach facility. Then we will use a ruler to watch the rate at which the water drops down through the hole over time.
Yeah.
And that will give us what's called a perk rate, or percolation
So what
rate.
happens if the rate doesn't drop fast enough?
If it doesn't drop fast enough, that would be a limitation to the site that you may not be able to build a septic system in this particular
This is a pretty
location.
important test then.
It is very important. So now I'm just going to take this water, pour it into the hole against a board that I've already got set up.
What's the board do?
What this does is it puts the water into the hole more gently so that we do not stir up the fine material in there.
Yeah.
And we want to bring this water level up to about 12 inches, and we're going to maintain that level for about 15 minutes, again, to simulate saturated conditions in the soil.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll check that. We're about 9 so far, so we're going to need another bucket of water, Richard.
All right, Brennan, it has been 15 minutes.
We want to see the time it takes to go from 9 inches down to 6 inches. Well, it dropped down to 6 inches in about 27 minutes.
So is that good?
Yeah, I've seen quicker than that, but it's somewhere right in the middle.
But you're telling us that we passed the test, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your help on the perk test.
Of course.
And that's how they do percolation tests, okay? Very scientific, huh? You pour some water in a hole to see how quick the dirt absorbs it. But that's it. All right, so land planning issues. We got the subdivider seeks out raw land that they could profitably subdivide. Then they determine if the proposed use is consistent with the local zoning ordinances and rules. Then they locate financial backers. Wow. So they didn't even get the financing yet in place to build this project before they go through all this work finding the land they could profitably subdivide, see if it meets with all the zoning ordinances and all that. And often they go through a lot of testing and spend a lot of money before they even find financial backers to buy the land. So basically, they buy this land to build all these houses on, or they put a contract in to buy the land, subject to a lot of conditions. You know, getting approval from zoning, getting approval from the financial backers, getting approval for their project before they even initiate their marketing strategies. Now, title to the individual parcels is transferred as lots are sold using what's known as a blanket mortgage, which has a partial release clause in it that allows you to sell off a smaller lot off of a larger one, and then the developer is not required to pay back the entire loan in one shot, just in bits and pieces as they sell off those smaller lots off of the larger one. Impact fees are paid to the municipality by a developer to help the community cope with the added demand and use of services, for the police, fire, school, garbage, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I refer to the impact fees as legal bribes that the developer needs to pay the municipality if they want to get their project approved. It is not uncommon that if it's a really big project, that the municipality can say, well, if you want to get our approval, you got to build us a school or donate 3 police cars and a fire truck, something like that. But I found that there's some other ways now that they're creatively trying to do this in municipalities through some kind of a grants, which is interesting. I don't know all the details about it yet, but it's another interesting thing that they're trying to do that's pretty creative that the politicians made up. So let's see how great that works out. Right now in our community, it's working out with high rises popping up everywhere. So let's do this on page 341. Under where it says title to the individual parcels of subdivided land is transferred as the lots are sold, I want you to write underneath that using a blanket mortgage with a partial release clause. And let me know when you got that highlighted. Using a blanket mortgage with a partial release clause. And then highlight the impact fees down here. Help the community cope with the increased demand for schools and other services. And I showed you guys images before, and I explained to you what a lot and block number is. Okay, within subdivisions, all throughout the municipality, your whole entire municipality has block numbers. Every block has a number, and every lot has its own individual number, consecutive number within those blocks. They're not legal descriptions of land in their own, but they can be used to identify parcels. Everybody got that?
Yes, I got it.
And then highlighted impact fees. All right. So once again, that blanket mortgage, it's used to purchase a large lot that you're then going to divide into smaller lots. Selling those smaller lots off of the larger lot would usually trigger that due on sale clause, that modified alienation clause that would require you to normally pay back the entire loan in full. But a blanket mortgage has this partial release clause that allows you to just pay it off in segments as you sell off smaller lots off of the larger one, like this. So you use the blanket mortgage to purchase the entire property, and then you subdivided it, and as you sell off a smaller lot, you only pay back 1/6 of the loan, and so on and so forth as you sell off the other parcels. See, these are lot and block numbers in this map. Here's a municipal tax map of a section of town. And you can see every block has a number here. 302, 303, 304. There are lot numbers, and then there are those are block numbers, and then the individual smaller lots are the parcels where you would build a house on them. So this is what a municipal tax map would look like. Lays it out by lot and block number. So this one is on 335, lot number 5. So block 355, lot number 5. 355? And it looks like 335, not 355. Yeah, that's 335. Yeah, that's 336. Yeah. Oh, I got that written wrong there. All right. And then they got to figure out, the developer got to figure out, how am I going to lay out the streets? The street patterns. You could do it the classic gridiron way, which makes the blocks look like ice trays, but they're basically straighter roads. Or you could have a curvilinear pattern like this. And they could lay out the lots. You could have them clustered together a lot closer and have smaller lots closer together so that you could have more park space and open land. Or you could have your conventional garden estate where everybody has a bigger lot and backyard. And you don't need as much parkland then. Which styles do you prefer? This is something a developer would have to decide what they're going to do in their plans. Here's an example of a cul-de-sac street where, I have this property. This is my property here, where this is all my property, right? And then I'm going to subdivide it here. We're going to build a street. This is a cul-de-sac street. And here we have lot number 1, lot number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in this project. So now I could sell off these smaller lots off the larger one. I could even name the street, but I'd have to specify if I'm going to keep it private or am I going to dedicate it? Okay. I'm going to give it to the government, and then it'll be a government road, and then they're responsible for snow removal and maintenance of that road. What do I need to be the owner of a street for after I sell all the houses, right? Doesn't make sense. A plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location of the boundaries of each individual property. It's a plat map. So this is an example of a small plat map for this cul-de-sac. A plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location and boundaries of each of the individual properties. Now, covenants and restrictions are placed in deeds by private parties, not by governments. We learned this already. Private parties place restrictions in deeds. We call them restrictive covenants. The government has their own powers for how they can restrict how we use our property, right? Through their zoning ordinances and laws like that. Private property owners, they put restrictive covenants in deeds. A moratorium would be a halt to any further development in the municipality. You could add that to your definition list too. A moratorium is a halt to any further development in the area. As long as you get all your approvals for any construction project you wanted to do, you get all those approvals approved. If you record them in the public records, that your approvals, even if they call a moratorium a halt to further development, you could still carry on with your project, even though they call the moratorium, because you had your approvals recorded before they did. FHA has a minimum standard for construction materials if those properties that you're building are going to be accepting FHA loans. Well, FHA is not going to give the loan unless your construction was up to certain standards. And at least 51% of that complex is owner occupied. It's estimated that the development costs for any construction project like this is going to be 4 to 6 times the cost of the raw land. When you take into consideration all the engineering and construction cost and legal fees and real estate agent commissions and marketing and advertising and all that, it's about 4 to 6 times the cost of the raw land itself for the bigger projects. We're not talking about for an individual house. Density zoning, we learned if something is dense, it's packed, right? It's tight. So density zoning is zoning to build the most homes as close as possible, right? So it's zoning that restricts the maximum number of homes that can be built per acre. Or another way to word that is zoning for the most homes that could be built per acre. You pack them in as close as you can. All right. So let's highlight dedication, turning over land to the government, to the municipality. A moratorium is a halt to further development in an area. Covenants and restrictions, these are restrictions. Restrictive covenants are placed in deeds by private parties, not by governments. We went over that in chapter 6 on page 104. Remember, estates and land based on restrictions are called fee determinable, defeasible, or conditional fee estates. What do we call ownership forever, not based on a restriction? Unrestricted ownership forever. Fee simple, or fee simple absolute. Ownership based on restriction is fee determinable, defeasible, or conditional fee, because it's based on a condition. Let me know when you guys got all these highlights in and notes that you wish to take so that I could then change the page.
Got it.
Okay.
I need a moment.
Did you say you needed more time? Because I was very muffled. Is that what you said? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Just let me know when you're done.
I got it.
Okay. So the development costs, like I said, are 4 to 6 times the raw cost of the land. Here's just where we're getting these notes. Once again, it's a factoid. It's not on exam, so you don't necessarily have to highlight this. Density zoning, however, let's highlight that. It's zoning for the maximum amount of homes that can be built per acre. That's on page 344. Density zoning.
Got it.
All right, so when dealing with environmental issues, there could have been problems in the past. There could have been soil contamination in the past or something that the current property owner may be liable for. Because remember, the NJDEP, they don't give excuses. You know, who's responsible for contamination on land? The property owner, right? So we have had instances over the years where somebody built a housing project on maybe a former garbage dump or contaminated land. You know, if you're buying a brand new house, wouldn't you assume that that brand new home is on pristine land? You know, well, don't assume anything, you know. So because of that, you know, we have environmental impact studies that need to be done. They're required, especially before any federal project that affect the quality of life. And it requires info about planned projects and possible solutions and how they impact the environment. You got to check for contamination. They also have reports about any like rare species of animals or insects or something that may be on the property, how it affects the traffic or drainage issues. If there was a dead body dug up in this construction project, all of a sudden they're digging up ground and now they're digging up bones. Well, we need to stop right there, call the police, because are those new bones? Did somebody just get murdered and get buried on this property? Is it an older crime, or is it just a historic significance? Was this maybe an old burial ground of some sort? Or was there a battle fought here and this is where the bodies were laid and buried, you know? Could that have an effect on your real estate project here? Absolutely. It's definitely going to stop it, at least for a couple of days, until the coroner can come down and determine if those are new bones or if they've been there for a long time. And if they've been there for a long time, now we got to get the Historic Society to come out and figure out what's going on. And you may not be able to build anything on there until this stuff gets all sorted out. You guys remember when the World Trade Centers got attacked and the World Trade Centers came down? They were going to build the Freedom Towers there. And you see underneath the ground, when they dug in for a deeper foundation, that they found a buried ship. Did anybody ever hear of that? The buried ship that they found underneath where the World Trade Center stood? Anybody ever hear that before? It's interesting. Here, I had one video on this. You could do a little Google search and find out about this, but because you could get more information here, this is just a short video where they show you how it affects that construction project. But if you want more details on this, what they actually found, they did find things that were buried there, you know, jewelry, pottery, all kinds of stuff like that, coins and things of that nature they found there. It's interesting.
With Plymouth
Yeah. Hold on a second. We got to mute this.
Rock, I never wonder if I'm covered for home and auto.
More saving.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty significant find. It's the kind of thing that archaeologists are always hoping to find in landfill deposits. It's a ship. It was probably put here around in the early 1800s. We know that this area, this whole block, was filled in between about 1790s and the 1830s. So we figure the ship probably predates that and was used as part of the landfilling process. So they filled the ship with dirt and rocks, and in conjunction with timber cribbing features or landfill retaining structures on either side, sunk them to the bottom of the river and used it to create new land along the waterfront. at this point, we really don't know much. So we kind of just have to continue our analysis, see what what's under the boat, what's in the dirt around it, and see if that can tell us anything. We're assuming it was placed here in the early 1800s based on historic maps and how they show us how the shoreline progressed. Basically, they would just sink it little by little and gradually extend the shoreline, and usually build new wharves and piers out into the river, leaving a slip in between so boats could continue to sail in and out. And then as waterfront land became more and more valuable and more necessary, they would continue filling in and extending the shoreline gradually. And it's tied into commerce and trade of the early 19th century. There have been ships found in the city before. There was a famous one on Water Street found in the early 1980s. And it's the kind of thing that everyone always hopes to find. It's an exciting find. It's a big find. It's something that's interesting. We can get a lot of information about it. It's a very unique part of history that, we wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Isn't that interesting, though? I mean, granted, you got a bunch of construction workers now standing around with their thumbs up their butts there, waiting for them to get done doing whatever it is they're doing, but it put a halt to that construction project, which was a very famous construction project, building the Freedom Tower, and it was imperative that they get it done in a timely fashion, only to get held up by by finding these remains here. Interesting that the wood that was used to build this ship came from the same region where they built the Liberty, where they put the Liberty Bell, for the stand for the Liberty Bell. But they showed you also how New York is a peninsula and how it was very narrow. And way back then in the late 1700s, 1800s, what they were doing is they were building out the shoreline where those twin towers and now the Freedom Tower is standing. That used to be water. That's where the waterfront was. They actually built it up by sinking ships, filling them with rocks and dirt and stuff like that, sinking those ships and then doing backfill with dirt to expand the shoreline. And now you have more and more property. They actually, a lot of New York is man-made. Used to be water. Interesting stuff. I think they did the same thing in Dubai. Look, federal agencies are required to conduct these EIS, the environmental impact studies, for any federally insured or projects or what have you. It covers different types of areas, especially environmentally fragile ones. So before any construction project can be created, they got to test the soil, make sure it's not contaminated, check to see how it affects any animals or whatever in the area as well. And of course, if there's any historic stuff that ends up getting dug up, well, that's just something you stumble across. But the EIS studies deal with the studying the soil, making sure it's not contaminated, and then also affecting how the water, the runoff is going to be handled, how it's going to affect the environment around it, including any wildlife. If you should be starting a project and it turns out that the rare hooded owl has taken refuge in a tree on your lands and they're using it now as their breeding grounds, you're screwed. Your project ain't going anywhere now because we wouldn't want to disturb that wildlife that found it comforting to now make your property a breeding ground. Yeah, you can't do nothing with it anymore. Not unless that bird decides to fly away or mysteriously gets shot. Yeah, don't do that. Okay, so let's see. So before any construction can take place in environmentally sensitive areas, we need to get that permission from the DEP, because they've been granted the authority to regulate the wetlands under the Wetlands Protection Act of 1970, the highlands areas of the state under the Highlands Water Protection Act, The Pinelands under the Pinelands Protection Act, the coastal areas under CAFRA, and the Waterfront Development Act. So before you do any construction projects or before any builders do, they should always consult the guide by Bob. Before you buy, before you build. That's what by Bob stands for. All right, and then these are the different acts of law that give that authority to the DEP to regulate these different areas. Highlands Protection Act protects the drinking water when paving over more than 1 acre or an acre or more. Pinelands Act regulates 22% of the state's land area under the Pinelands National Reserve, the Pine Barrens. The Wetlands Act requires a permit to excavate, fill, or build on certain areas, and it covers both coastal and inland freshwater areas. Then you got the Coastal Area Review Act, CAFRA, for clustering for open space and planned unit developments. And the Waterfront Development Act regulates outside the CAFRA area. The DEP must approve plans for waterfront development on any navigable water or stream. After Sandy, FEMA even redrew their flood maps because of this. The Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act has rules intended to protect the public from unscrupulous developers and marketers from undue sales pressure. Yeah, with like timeshares. Remember that? Buyers have 7 calendar days to cancel the contract for the purchase or lease of such lands. And advertisements for new construction of out-of-state properties marketed to New Jersey residents, as well as large in-state subdivisions with 100 lots or more, or if it's less than 100 lots, but there's common areas involved, and there's at least 10 units or more, they follow the same rules. All contracts and disclosures must be available in the same language the property is advertised in, and they get 7 calendar days to cancel the contracts. So let's highlight those things now. Rules intended to protect the public from unscrupulous developers or marketers from undue sales pressure. That's the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. They have 7 calendar days. Also covers larger subdivisions. And here I wrote all properties that advertise in languages other than English. Subsequent forms must be available to prospective purchasers in the same language used in the original advertising. But that applies to new construction only. Okay. Just let me know when everybody's done with their highlights.
Got it.
Anybody else still highlighting? Oh, we lost somebody.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Jervin, I'll give you a second. You want to get these highlights? Let me know when you got it. Jervin, you got those highlights?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Get these ones as well. This covers all the stuff we already went over. Page 346.
I got it.
All right. Everybody good?
Yep.
And then also on page 346, the UCC, the state's minimum standard for construction, the Uniform Construction Code, different UCC than the last chapter, which was the Uniform Commercial Code, which regulated the sale of businesses. This is the UCC, the Uniform Construction Code. Now, there's a little good to know thing that you got here that I wrote. You should probably do the same thing. You may find this useful at some point in your career. Sometimes people think that they don't want to do any, like on a commercial property, for example. I know somebody one time that they needed to redo their bathrooms because they were stinking. You know, they were having problems with the sewer pipes or something like that. And they're like, well, we can't remodel all this because if we do, then we're going to have to bring the whole building up to code. And I was like, no, you don't. I was like, this doesn't equal half the, not even half the area of your building here. So you would only need to bring any new construction up to code, but the rest of the building would not have to be brought up to code. She was the owner. She was scared of the costs involved to do that. So, you know, I advised her, I said, no, in New Jersey, existing buildings do not have to conform to the latest building codes unless they're found unsafe. When alterations or repairs cost more than half the value of an existing building, the entire building must be brought up to code. When alterations amount between 25 to 50% of the building, only the new construction needs to be brought up to code. Okay? So she was worried about that for the longest time. And then she ended up not doing anything anyway. She ended up just selling the property. All right, everybody good there?
Yes.
New Jersey also has this, which will also be on exam. Then any new construction, it must come with a 10-year builder's warranty that's registered with the DCA in Trenton. They basically, builders purchase these warranties from the places that do the inspection, the state. So all new construction, this is part of the new Warranty and Builders Registration Act, requires builders of all new homes must register a warranty against new home defects up to 10 years. So it's a 10-year warranty that's purchased from and registered with the DCA in Trenton. If municipality doesn't have their own building code enforcement officials, an inspector from the DCA will be sent down to do those inspections. Construction permits must be issued before construction, alteration, or demolition, or change of use of occupancy of any building can happen. So how do construction permits work? Well, when you go down to get a construction permit, applicant must provide information like the location of the property, construction plans, the estimated cost of the work, and the names and addresses of the owners and the designated contractors. Local construction officials must inspect the application and the property to determine if whether it conforms with the requirements of the building code. And then within 20 days, they either approve the plans and issue a permit, or they reject it in writing along with a cause for the rejection. And if rejected, the applicant may revise the plans to meet with the requirements, or they could appeal their rejection to the Construction Board of Appeals. So once issued, the construction permit may be revoked if it contains any false or misleading information or omissions, or if the construction was not started within 12 months of the permit being issued, or if the work is suspended for 3 months or longer after it has begun. Now, sometimes people, they get angry because municipalities are taking forever with their permits. Well, you can have a say and you can file complaints if they're dragging their feet around. And some municipalities, they do things the wrong way, and they try to play games, I guess, with you to try to make it take longer. Like if you submit to them all of your plans for electrical, plumbing, framing, and all that stuff, they got 20 days to approve those plans. So what they're going to do is you submitted all those different permits that you paid for separately, and each one of them you should get within 20 days. But sometimes municipalities are like, oh, well, we got the plans for this, so we got 20 days, and then it goes over to the other department, then they get 20 days, then it goes over to the other department, they got 20 days. So in about 60 days, you'll get it. And it's not the way that it works. So if they're doing things wrong, you contact the DCA in Trenton, let them know what the hell's going on over here. You could also file a complaint with the Construction Board of Appeals for them not getting their stuff together and doing it right. Let me see. Okie doke. All right, Jeremy. All right, so enforcement. The building codes, they're enforced by the Department of Community Affairs if your local municipality does not have their own inspection agency and inspectors to do that work. So the Uniform Construction Code requires a construction permit to be issued for each county or municipality before any construction, alteration, demolition, So all that stuff I had on a previous slide right here, just highlight that. This is all the other things, about 20 days. They either approve it or deny it, reject it. This is a lot of the same stuff that I had on a previous slide here.
I got it.
So once the work has been completed, before anybody can occupy these new structures, it needs to have an inspection, and a CO, Certificate of Occupancy Inspection Certificate, will be issued once you've passed your inspection, showing that there are no conditions present that would cause a threat to the health or safety of the occupants there. A COC, a Certificate of Compliance, would be issued for work done on existing structures that are not new construction. And a CCO, anytime there's no work done but a simple transfer of ownership takes place. We need to know this because we sell properties, right? And when we sell properties, before we could close on a deal, the owner needs to get a CO. They need to register for that inspection with the municipality. Some municipalities have different names for the different inspections. Some of them just refer to all the inspections as a CO, whether it's new or existing properties or if there's just a simple transfer, depending on the municipality. Okay, so you guys got that? So, safety and building requirements. Smoke detectors are required on each level of a building and within 10 feet of any sleeping quarters. Carbon monoxide.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
This one?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So smoke detectors on each level of the building and within 10 feet of any sleeping quarters, and carbon monoxide detectors now, as of an update in 2019, cannot have the batteries that you pull out. They can't just be the ones you plug in the wall without any battery backup either. They must have that 10-year sealed battery. Otherwise, you're not going to pass the CO inspection to sell the property. Homes built after 1978 that required hardwired detectors, well, your local fire inspector may still want a battery backup one, because what if the power goes out? Hell, usually during fires, power does go out. Wires get melted, they get shorted out. They want to make sure that those alarms will be going off to alert the occupants there. So a lot of times your local fire inspector would also want the battery backups. And fire extinguishers must be mounted in kitchens or within 10 feet of them using the hardware they came with. They have to be rated to put out ABC type fires and must be under 10 pounds. Well, update, as of March 2025, it is no longer required by state law, because the governor just waved his magic wand and said, I want to put an end to that for some odd reason. Didn't say, just said, that's no longer required. However, your local fire officials may still require them, but state law does not. Okay, so keep that in mind. Do whatever the local fire officials tell you. All right, so what is an ABC type fire extinguisher? It's rated, fires are rated based on their combustibles, you know, and so what is the fire extinguisher rated to put out? What kind of fires? Electrical fires, chemical fires, gas fires, wood and paper and trash, regular trash type fires. So that's what ABC type fires are. Under 10 pounds was so that it's easily, you could grab it easily, you know, and handle it easy, because there was a rash of fires and from children reaching up on the stoves, and the grease, the hot grease falls on them, they catch on fire, and then the mother would throw water on the child. That's the worst thing you could do, but that's your first gut reaction. You know, you put the fire out, throw water on it, you know, worst thing you could do for a grease fire. So they ended up passing a law years ago that required the fire extinguishers be mounted in or within 10 feet of a kitchen. Okay, so you guys got these highlights and wrote these notes here? You do not require the fire extinguishers anymore, but like I said, sometimes your local fire inspection inspector may want them still.
I got it.
Okay. So, yeah, that was back in 2005 when they passed that law. Acting Governor Richard Codey stepped in for McGreevey when he bowed out with after his scandal. You know, he was married, and turns out that he had an affair with some guy, and that was a big scandal. And so he bowed out of being a governor, and then acting governor Richard Codey stepped in, and then this happened here with this. A fifth grader suggested that, hey, why don't you just require fire extinguishers be required to be in the kitchens? You know, novel idea. Took a fifth grader to figure it out. So here, A puts out trash, wood, paper, B puts out liquids, gas, and solvents, and C puts out electrical fires. Once again, not required anymore. But you probably should. You know, I mean, it makes common sense. You know, you got something burning like that, or able to burn. That's what fire extinguishers are for, right? That's I still got one in my house by my kitchen. I got one in my garage. I even carry one around in my truck under my back seat, you know. And I have for years. Years ago, I came across a fire on the parkway by a toll booth, a car fire. Me and my friend, we pulled over really quick. We ran over there, and the car was on fire, and the occupants were still in the car. You know, we told them, get the hell out of the car. The one person got out of the car. The other one, their seatbelt was stuck, you know. So in the meantime, while he was trying to go back and get a knife, you know, I went and got the fire extinguisher, trying to keep the fire down, you know, while they're trying to cut the seatbelt out to get the person out of the car. They didn't even realize their car was on fire when they pulled over. They just saw that it was overheating, but the car was on fire. All right. So, yeah, so it always pays to have a fire extinguisher in case of emergencies. Those small ones, they're small, you know. Okay, so New Jersey has the hotel, motel, multiple dwelling health and safety law. Wait a minute. What kind of properties do we prepare contracts for? Only 1 to 4 families and single residential lots. So I guess that would fall under the multiple dwelling section. As far as hotels and motels, you know, that's state a little bit regulated there, and attorneys put together contracts for those things. But anyway, we're not talking about either of that. This hotel, motel, multiple dwelling health and safety law was enacted to ensure that residents in New Jersey have decent standards and safe living conditions. So the state inspection is often referred to as a green card inspection, because when you passed the inspection, they gave you a certificate on a card that was green in color with the, you know, the what do they call it? With all the markings on it that made it look official and legit. Water marking, I think they called it. So it has nothing to do with immigration. This has to do with it's just the industry lingo because the card's color was green, so they call it the green card inspection. It's just a state inspection of the building. So it must be performed at least once every 5 years and applies to buildings with 3 or more units, not counting the unit that the owner lives in. Now, hotels and motels with 10 or more units of sleeping space or facilities for more than 25 persons, the inspection needs to be done at least once every 3 years, and they're often just spot inspections without any announcement beforehand giving you a warning that they're giving that inspection. So this is the main one we need to know for exams, though, is that the multi-family houses, 3 or more units that are available for rent, need to have that state inspection at least once every 5 years. So let's highlight that here. Multiple dwellings with 3 or more units are inspected at least once every 5 years, and hotels at least once every 3. And then I wrote here, this is the state green card inspection.
I got it.
Yep. Okie dokie. It's page 348. And that's the end of this chapter. Chapter 18 is concluded. Let's do the key terms to review. There is only one key terms to review for this chapter, so let's get to it, shall we? Charges to the developer for extra roads, schools, and so forth.
Impact fees.
Impact fees would be correct. 7 is A. Test of the soil's absorption and drainage capacity.
Percolation test.
A percolation or perk test, 10 is B. Division of property into more than one building lot.
Subdivision.
16 is C, division. Community with dense zoning and developer's plan for the entire land use.
Density zoning. No.
A community with dense zoning and developer's plan for the entire land use.
Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. No.
It's the planned unit development, or a PUD.
Okay.
So 12 is D. A group setting standards for local subdivisions.
Planning board.
That is the planning board. 13 is E. A halt to development in the area. A halt to development in an area.
I don't know.
It's called a moratorium. 9 is F.
Okay.
New Jersey standards for building.
UCC.
Correct. 17 is G, the Uniform Construction Code. A U.S. requirement for some developments to be registered with the CFPB. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You.
Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act.
Yes. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Yes. 8 is H. Correct. State regulations for building of new homes.
Warranty and Builders Registration Act.
18 is I. Correct. That's requiring that 10-year builder's warranty. A permit permits buyers to up to 7 calendar days to cancel contracts for the lease or purchase of such lands.
Real Estate Sales Full Disclosure Act.
Yes, 15 is J. A law requiring certain registration of certain developments within New Jersey. A law requiring registration of certain developments within New Jersey.
Planned Real Estate Development Act.
Yes, 11 is K. Zoning that allows more living units per acre than usual.
Density zoning.
Yes, 5 is L. Map of a town, section, or subdivision.
Plat.
It's a plat. A plat is a map, a plat map. 14 is M. New Jersey state agency that approves and registers some out-of-state properties before they could be marketed to New Jersey residents.
Clustering.
Number 1 is N, the Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control, which is a division within the Real Estate Commission itself. It's actually one guy, but within the Real Estate Commission itself. So 1 is N. Local municipalities authorization for building plans. What is that authorization you got to get before you could go through with your building plans?
Environmental impact statement. No. Litigation.
Building permit. 3 is O. Construction permit, right?
Okay.
Engineering report often required before building permits are issued. Make sure the ground's not contaminated that you're building all those new homes on, right? What do we call that? EIS, the environmental impact studies. 6 is P. Turning over private property to a municipality for dedication. 4 is Q. Putting living units closer together to leave more open space.
Clustering.
That would be clustering. 2 is R. And that concludes chapter 18.